Hey guys, what's up? Evan from Stock Music Musician, and today I've got a video on how to master in Reason. I previously made one of these videos, but there were some technical difficulties, so I hope you'll enjoy this video a lot more. If you've got any questions about mastering or mixing or using Reason, be sure to leave me a comment below. Today we're just going to do a high-level overview and some steps you could take and some tools you might want to use to do it. So, the first thing is to define what mastering even is. Basically, mastering is doing everything needed to create the final version of your song, the last step before it gets handed off to fans or distributors or anybody else, to clients. So it's more than just making it loud and sound good. In terms of making it loud, yes, that's a big part of it, but you have to make it loud in the right way. You can't make it too loud. In terms of making it sound better, you're not going to be doing that much. If you feel like if the mix is improving by more than like 5%, it means you probably didn't do enough in the mixing stage or the recording stage. So if your mixes don't sound good before you even start mastering, you might want to focus more on mixing. Mastering is not a panacea. It's just sort of a tightening, a fine-tuning, and using some more global tools to gel your mix a little bit more. The other thing that mixing is it's a final chance to really listen to your song and make sure everything is going right. So the first thing I recommend you do when you mix is to import your audio file of your whole mix into a stereo file. Why is this important? Well, like I said, one big part of mastering is making the final file. So you don't want to have any gaps at the beginning or a cut off tail at the end or too much dead space. Getting that right is one of the prime jobs of mastering. So that's the first step. Get it into a wave where you can actually see how the song goes. Now you might want to adjust the tempo here to match the tempo of your original song, depending. If you're recording an album and you're mastering an album, you're going to want to have all of the tracks side by side. Let's make a new track. And so if you're doing an album, what you would do is you would actually lay the song side by side like this to make sure that the overlap, that the songs flow the way you want them to, that there's the right amount of space between them, that any transitions crossfade, and then ultimately that they're going to be at the same level and the same tone. But if you're only doing one song, which is really what we're going to focus on today, the first thing you want is to get this audio file in here. Then let's zoom into the front and the back to get them starting and stopping at the right spot. So let's adjust this to the grid. This way we can cut right here. And let's see about starting it this way. We definitely don't want to click on. And maybe, do we want to even go one? Let's try it like this. And what about going all the way? That's perfect, okay. And now let's go to the end of the song. So you can see it's still even here. Let's zoom in just a little bit more. There is still information till the very end almost. So we'll cut it here and then we'll add a smoother end than there would have been traditionally. And now let's see. Perfect. Okay, so those two things, those small, make all the difference, especially if you have a really long gap or if your song started too soon or ended too soon previously. This is how you ensure a quality mix. Now, and then when you go, the next thing you're going to want to do is set the loop point, once we start doing this, to the loudest part of your song, because that's what we're going to want to master on. Or we want to test the maximizer. Alright, so that's the loudest part of the song. So the next thing we're going to do is now open the master section. Surprise, surprise. Turn bypass off and we don't need the sequencer anymore, so we're gonna open this up. Let's delete all of these. I really don't think anything aside from the M-class equalizer is that useful for mastering in Reason. They're not very good plugins compared to what's out there in the world. So we do want the low cut at 30 hertz is actually maybe low, to be honest. So we'll open this EQ here. This is gonna just give us some EQ information. And what we're gonna do is turn off the low shelf, but we are going to listen for any peaks. A narrow Q, and we're just gonna swoop it. Usually there's something around 120. So we'll just do a small cut, 2 dB. If you've got more than a few paces you want to cut, then you probably have to go back to mixing. And usually around 240 there's something that sounds bad. And let's actually go to a slightly earlier part of the mix, to be honest. Let's try it. So that's a great way. I would not recommend doing more than 3 or 4 cuts. Another even better tool for this would be to use FabFilter's Pro Q3. With this, sort of paint by numbers, but hey, it works fast and easy. If you hold it over it, it will actually show you the peaks. We can listen to them. Yeah, sure. And now let's also just add a little bit of a low cut here. Just on the very low end, 20 dB. Let's make this show a little, or the ladder a little steeper. So we've got subtractive EQ. That's part one. The next thing you want to do is I like to add a multiband compressor. And Reason doesn't come with one stock, but you can engineer one. There's some presets and patches for it, although they're kind of confusing the way they work. So honestly, from here, what I normally do is just use Ozone 7. It's a little expensive, but it has everything you need to do this. But if you can't quite afford that, there's plenty of other ways you can go. So Waves has a really nice multiband compressor, the C4, totally worth using, and let's do that. You can often pick them up on sales. I'll put a link to it down below if you want. So when I use a multiband compressor on the whole mix, really what I usually want to do is just control some of the low end so that it doesn't quite pump the mix as much. So we don't want these other bands. We're just adjusting the threshold so that they're not maybe like 2 decibels of. We're getting a little in the middle, that's fine. So when you're listening for compression, what you want to listen for is the absence of something. And what I'm trying to do is do a little absence of attack on the very lowest end, and letting the smack of the kick come through more than the thwomp of the kick. And then what we can do is we can even do, so if we want to turn the, well, we don't need to turn the gain up on everything, but we can turn the gain up on the mid-band just a little bit, and on the low end to make up for the loss of volume. All right, so we've got that in place. Now what I like to do after I take the low end off of through the multiband compressor is to use just a regular old bus compressor. Again, Waves makes a great one here with the SSL comp stereo. This works all the time. It's a lot like the stock one in Reason. So you could also use that one. This one sounds a little better to me, but not much of a difference. And I always use pretty much the same settings. And all I'm trying to do is get about 2 dB of gain on the whole mix. So it's coming in a little hot, so let's just turn the output down a couple dB, dB and a half. Because the SSL compressor models a classic or real device, if you hit it too hard, it's not going to sound very nice. About the right levels. Alright, so now we've got some light compression. The next thing I like to do is add a little bit of coloring. Again, iZotope Ozone, the full version, has all of these things, and I'll put a link below to it. It's a really good deal, but it is an expensive way to start, so if you've just picked up things over time, don't worry about it. The next thing I like to do is add a little bit of coloring, sometimes through tape, sometimes not. Sometimes it's not needed, but we'll try and see what the Waves, where is it? Not the Kramer tape. So we'll see what it sounds like. It doesn't always work. Sometimes it sucks the life out of a song. Sometimes it doesn't. So mastering, big and open. Let's start there. Clipping a bit, which let's hear it without. That's what we want. Touch noise. That gives it a natural thickness, but also a little bit of pumping and dynamics to it. So the next thing I want to do, we've colored it, we've taken away the bad frequencies, we've controlled it a little bit. Now we might want to just enhance a few frequencies. And here I think the MAAG 4 EQ by Plug-in Alliance, or there's one for Reason stock, which is a lot cheaper, unless you get the Plug-in Alliance one on sale, and it's the RE3Q 6-band equalizer. This is a really good equalizer. You can do a little bit of sub-thump, or you can do this high-end EQ boost, shelf boost, that sounds really nice. So we're adding in some high end here. That's obviously way too much, but let's breathe a little bit. And let's see about adding some sub. No, that's not helping much, but that is driving it just a little bit. And we'll sort of, this is before. No, I don't think that's helping, so we'll delete that. But you might want to consider doing some additive EQ at that point. Now, I really don't think there's a good mastering. I don't think the stock Reason Master M-Class mastering plugin is good at all. It doesn't give you the information you need, and I don't think it's a very good mastering tool. I think you should at least get iZotope Ozone's Elements. There's also a rack extension called the Ozone Maximizer, which is good. I think the Ozone Elements is better because it includes a few more features, and it's also a VST, so you can use it in other DAWs if you move to another DAW down the line. That said, I think it's if you don't have a version of Reason that can run VSTs, then you should check out the rack extension. And I'll put a link down to Ozone Elements, but there's a few things to notice here. There's an equalizer, which you can either do for cutting or boosting. An imager, and you can actually download a free version of this from Ozone. I totally recommend doing that. I use it even when I'm just on tracks in general. So I'll put a link down to Ozone. And then it comes with the maximizer, but equally importantly, it comes with a really good meter, so you know what you're doing. And I recommend using the integrated meter, so that this is going to tell you the LUFS and the value you want to get to for mastering. Here you can click on the settings and get to the full one, and you want to show the peak hold. I think that's helpful, just so that you can know if you're peaking. With this model, with this setting, what you're aiming to do is to get to an LUFS, which is like an average loudness of like -14, and you want your peaks to be -1. You do not want your peak to go over that, because what will happen is on streaming services, or when your song gets converted to an MP3 or something like that, it can create clipping if you go too high to the 0. So you leave yourself a ceiling of 1 decibel by pulling this button down here. That will save a lot of your mixes from sounding like crap in the final version. I think IRC2 sounds better than IRC1. And now this threshold, basically, you can even put learn threshold and set the target at -14, so it already knows it. So this is how much of a boost. And the character can make it breathe a bit more. So that's basically where it recommends going at -4.8. If you want a little more thwap, you can turn on the transient emphasis. So let's listen. But without any compression even coming off. Slow to open, or really fast crack down. I think the middle somewhere is nice. You don't want to overdo it though. Right, we've already gone past 14. Right around here's the right spot. And let's also fire up the imager to make it spread out a little bit more. I like modern width. Let's try it with that on and off. See how that opens up a bit? So there you have it. Once you get that done, you've got your wide space, you've EQ'd out the good, the bad sounds, you've got the great level, then you just go File, Bounce, and you bounced your song. That's how you master a song in Reason. So I hope you found this useful. Like I said, I think some version of Ozone is your best bet. I realize it's an investment, but it's probably the best money you can spend on mastering, on mixing. It'll make your tracks sound easy. It'll make them sound better. and it's fast, it's easy to use. And so I hope you really enjoyed this. Like I said, I'll put a link down below to where you can get these plugins. I'd recommend the full version of Ozone instead of getting each of these individual ones. But if you already have the individual ones, you can put them together in a way that makes it really easy to work with the cheaper version of Ozone Elements. I hope you really enjoyed this. Thanks.